we go. All right. Yay. So welcome everyone. I am Suzanne Bontempo, and I'm here to share with you everything I know about growing food in the water-wise way. And good news is I've been professionally gardening with the water-wise approach for a long time throughout the Bay Area. So I've got some good tips and tricks to share with you today. And today's program is proudly sponsored by Livermore's Water Agencies. We have City of Livermore, Cal Water, and Zone 7 here with us today. Give you guys a round of applause. Would anyone like to say hello? A brief intro? We'll just keep going.
Well, I would like to say hello. My name is Susan Cordone, and I'm so pleased to be here. Like I said earlier, I plan on learning from you as well. And I'm very, very passionate about water conservation, as probably is everybody here if they've joined this type of a meeting. But I'll pass it over to Natalie. Nice to see everybody.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Croak. I work for City of Livermore in the Water Resources Division, and I just wanted to wish everyone happy Earth Day. I'm really excited to be sharing Earth Day with you guys and learning more about water conservation.
And I'm Alexandra Bradley, and I'm the Communication Specialist for Zone 7 Water Agency. I am in charge of managing our outreach and communications programs, and I am an avid gardener and very passionate about gardening and the environment and the connection, and I'm excited to be able to tie this into water conservation. I'm hoping to learn some tricks for my own garden as well as some tricks that I can pass off to our community. So I'm excited to have Suzanne and all of us here today. So thanks for joining us.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
And I'm Allison Cleary. My video is currently not working, but I'm the conservation coordinator at Zone 7. So all the rebate applications come through me. And I'm really excited to hear what Suzanne has to say today.
And Allison, I apologize. I just made it so that your video, there you are. Yes,
Hello.
So sorry, I forgot. So yes, so nice to see you. Thanks everyone, we're so excited. So yeah, let's talk about growing food with a water-wise way. So I'd just like to welcome everyone. It's Earth Day. I'm so excited that I get to talk to you today about growing food. It's very appropriate and it's a fun way to celebrate the day. So our agenda today is we're going to go through slides for a good solid 45 minutes. And then I'm going to leave time afterwards for our questions. So as questions come up, don't hesitate to pop them into the Q&A. You can also put comments in the chat. And then the team here is going to go through those, and we're going to answer and address the questions and comments at the end. And what we're going to learn today is how to increase the health of our soil, how to water effectively and efficiently, how to water plants with, how to plant and water, plant a water-wise veggie garden. Oh my gosh. Why planting cover crops is so key to all of this. And then which food crops are going to be the most water-wise, as well as some additional resources for you. Okay, so hopefully the rest of the program will go a little smoother than that. So I'm an integrated pest management educator, or IPM educator. And because of this, I can't start any program without just talking a little bit about IPM, because it is the foundation of everything as far as I'm concerned. So it's a decision-making process that uses science-based strategies. It allows us to look at the system as a whole. In this case, it's going to be our garden. And this does have a lot to do with making a water-wise food garden. So just stay with me for a little bit. It helps us to identify the problem at hand, as opposed to, a lot of times what we see are symptoms of other problems. So it really helps us identify problems. And then from there, it helps us discern if it's something that we actually need to take action. So is it something we could live with, or is it something that we really have to manage? And then from there, if we do need to take an action, then we take a combination of actions, which would be a combination of cultural controls, which is bolstering the health of the environment, mechanical controls, which are the tools that we would use to manage the pest problems, biological controls are using living organisms to manage pest problems. And then of course, the chemical controls are the pesticides. And typically we always kind of leave this as kind of a last resort. And if we do need to use it, we're always going to use the least toxic, most eco-friendly method. And if it's a plant that's always struggled or has never really performed the way we expected it to, or it's kind of outgrown the space, or if it just hasn't been right, give yourself permission to remove that plant, maybe gift it to someone, and then you get the opportunity to, buy a new plant, add something new to the garden. So with that, let's get started. So I'm going to talk a little bit about setting your vegetable garden or food garden up for success. And we do that by applying IPM methods. So when we apply IPM methods to growing our food with a water-wise approach, we can actually have healthier crops, more yields, and less pest problems. And it all starts with the soil. So just to recap on what soil is briefly, soil is made up of 4 components: mineral particles, water, air, and organic matter. And we have here about 5% organic matter, and that's really our goal. That's really a nice kind of perfect growing conditions or growing soil. When we look at texture, this is typically that question that you've ever been asked: what kind of soil do you have? That's referencing the soil texture. So it's going to, be a combination between sand, silt, and clay. Most likely, most of us have clay soil, considering where we live in East Bay. However, we could have, just understanding sand is going to have larger particles that we physically can see. And in between those particles, we have a lot of airspace or larger air spaces. Silt is going to be medium-sized particles with medium-sized air spaces between. And then the clay, as you might very well be aware of, has very small, tightly packed particles, which they're almost completely stacked on each other. And there is very little space in between. So when we do try to water, we most likely have had that experience where we water and the water starts to pool on top of that soil, taking a very long time for it to infiltrate. All right, but then soil structure. Soil structure is actually how those soil components kind of fit together, what their relationship is. And what we are striving to achieve is to have soil structure that the particles stick together really nicely, but then also have space for air and for water to move through it, and for nutrients to move through it, and for earthworms to move through it, and other microorganisms. So, and the root systems and all that. So that's what we're trying to strive for. And the way we do that is by adding compost. So to have healthy food gardens, it begins with healthy soil. And the way we get healthy soil is by adding organic matter. Organic matter is pretty much the best thing you can do. Well, yeah, it's the number 1 best thing that you can do to your soil. We'll talk about the number 2 best thing in a minute. But when we add organic matter, AKA compost, we are able to correct, so to speak, that the structure, and make it easier for water to move through it, for air to be, for the soil to be aerated, to have air pockets, available, for root systems to grow through it, for nutrients to be available for those root systems. So it's really, really important. So you might think, oh, I don't really need to increase the water holding capacity with my clay. But in fact, what we need to increase is the air. We need to increase more pockets for air. And then when we have more pockets of air, that water can actually move through with more ease. So that's just something to consider, because ultimately, We want to improve that soil structure. We want to increase the health of the soil. And when we add compost, we're actually inoculating that soil with a larger diversity of microbiology, which is key, because that's going to really help the health of the root systems, thus the health of the plants. They have that nice symbiotic relationship. And then when we have healthy roots, we have healthy plants. When we have healthy plants, we have less pest problems. And then most number one important part of all of this is that it increases the water holding capacity. And that's what we're here to talk about. So this is kind of cool. I just saw this at the stopwaste.org website. So compost, when we add it to our soils, it reduces the plant's need for water by increasing how much water that soil can actually now hold. So again, with the clay, we might have had this like glob, but now when we add compost, we have like, it's now lighter and fluffier and has air, and it has places for pore spaces for water and air to move through. So by increasing the organic matter, the compost, by increasing that in our soil roughly about 5%, the water holding capacity quadruples. Isn't that amazing? It's pretty cool. So how do we get compost? Well, if we're not making it at home, we can buy it. We can buy it either in bulk from like a landscape supply yard, or we could just go to our local garden center or home improvement store or hardware store, and they sell bags of it. And the bags might have names like soil conditioner or soil amend or planting mix or planting compost, raised bed mix, soil builder, loam builder. These are really all the same. So what I encourage you to do is, a lot of times nowadays, you'll see little logos on the bag that says OMRI or CDFA. These are certifications that they are organic. If that's important to you, look for that label. Another thing I invite you to do is just turn that bag over and read the ingredients. Make sure you're happy with all the ingredients that are in that compost before you bring it home, and then mix it in with your existing soil. The way I like to mix compost in is if I have a plain planting bed. So I have a planting bed, either it's a raised bed or it's just on the ground, and I don't have any plants in it, and I want to amend that soil. So I'm going to lay out about 2 inches of compost. And then I'm going to mix that compost into that soil with my shovel or my fork. And now I've been able to mix it down about 6 inches. So I've got a total of now 8 inches of soil that has been amended with compost. And that should be pretty good. If I feel like it's still heavy, I might want to add some more compost and do that again. Now, if I have an area that's already planted and I'm adding plants as I go, then I'm going to, I call it spot amend, where I will dig a hole, I will amend that soil, and then I will plant that plant. So how much compost do I add? If I've got a 1 gallon pot, a plant that's in a 1 gallon pot, I'll take that plant out. I will fill that pot up with some compost, mix it into the soil, plant that plant, and we're good to go. You can also top dress compost around plants, and that is also going to work its way into the soil over time. And what's the key here is that we're adding that microbiology. We're enhancing the soil and supporting the beneficial bacteria and the beneficial fungi, which really helps transport nutrients and also helps with water holding capacity. But in addition to that, it helps to break down organic matter. It helps to store nutrients in the soil. It builds a relationship with those root systems. So the root systems are now able to take up nutrients and water with more ease. It helps break down toxins and pollutants. It holds the soil together, which is really cool. And then it's very important for us to feed our food crops. Food crops give us a lot of food, so we need to give them a lot of food. And we do that with organic fertilizers. Now, these are considered dry fertilizers. When we open up the bag or the box, what we see is something that looks like ground up oatmeal or ground up muesli. And if we look at the ingredients, these are all ingredients that we would be able to read and understand. It's going to say have ingredients like alfalfa meal, feather meal, fishbone meal, cottonseed meal, and so forth. These are all going to be byproducts of some type of farming industry or ag industry. And when we add them to the soil to feed the plants, we're actually feeding the plants in a way that they can take that food, take the nutrients in on an as need basis. That means they are able to access those nutrients when they need it. Unlike synthetic fertilizers, which act like a steroid for those plants, really kind of pushing and stimulating a lot of new growth, which one, stresses the plant out over time, and two, attracts a lot of pest insects because the pests like that tender new growth that's always getting stimulated. It's filled with a lot of plant sugars. Something else to understand when we work with organic fertilizers is actually we're increasing the health of the soil because we're feeding the microbiology. So that's also going to be key. So that means those root zones are going to be really active and really alive and healthy. We're also understand it's a more sustainable way to feed our plants. When we work with organic fertilizers, we can really get away with fertilizing at time of planting, and then maybe just a couple of times a year. When we work with synthetic fertilizers, we have to pay attention to what the reapplication rate is that is recommended for that product, for that chemical fertilizer, because we need to feed that plant as often as the bag says we need to, because that plant becomes dependent on that fertilizer. It's not something that, it's going to absorb, and then once it's gone, there's nothing else for it. We're not supporting the microbiology in the soil. So that's something to keep in mind. So if we've missed any type of fertilizing, then that plant becomes stressed out. Something else I can share briefly about synthetic fertilizers is that they have a tendency to be high in salts. And when we are fertilizing them and we're moving towards water conservation, we have a tendency to water less often, which is great for the plants. However, with synthetic fertilizers, there has a tendency to have that salt has a tendency to build up at the top couple inches of the soil. It's not getting flushed through. And what happens is over time, that salt buildup can be really detrimental to the soil and the plants. So here's kind of an illustration of what I was just speaking to. So we've got the organic fertilizers that feed the soil and all of that life within the soil that then has a symbiotic relationship with the root systems. The root systems give the microbiology sugars, and the microbiology gives the plant the nutrients it wants. Whereas the chemical fertilizers just strictly feed the plants. Okay, so guess what? Vegetables, well, pretty much all food crops love alfalfa meal. Alfalfa meal is super duper cool. It supercharges your plants. It adds nitrogen and trace minerals to the soil. It improves the tilth of the soil, and it contains a natural fatty acid that is a growth stimulant, and it's called, I'll let you pronounce that word, but it's really, really great. I will add it equal parts to my dry fertilizers. So let's say I'm planting my tomatoes. I'm going to add either my Sure Start or my all-purpose fertilizer or my vegetable fertilizer. And then I'm going to put equal parts alfalfa meal. So if it's a half a cup of vegetable all-purpose fertilizer, then it's going to be half a cup of alfalfa meal. And then I mix it right there, right around the root zone of where I'm planting, and we're good to go. And then earthworm castings. This is I've been talking about earthworm castings, I think, every single day this week, actually this month. Earthworm castings are superior at increasing the health of your plants. It's just a great idea to add earthworm castings when we're planting our vegetables. It's nice to work it into any of our, fruit trees or berries or any of our food crops. We can work it in around the drip line of our plants underneath mulch, or we can work it into our veggie beds, or we can just do a top dressing and then put the mulch on top. However you want to incorporate it into the soil, just doesn't need much. All we need, sometimes even just a tablespoon or two in my house plants. I see such an amazing difference because it contains an abundance of nutrients and minerals essential for plants to thrive. The earthworm castings are just loaded with beneficial bacteria and really important enzymes and really important plant humus that is just going to feed our plants and give them all the oomph those plants want. It also is going to help provide dynamic root growth and plant structure. It's highly effective for preventing insect pests and inhibiting diseases. There are enzymes and chitins that move through that cell structure of that plant that almost act as if it's like a insect repellent. I'm not exactly sure how it works. It is really wild, but it's amazing. So if you're not familiar with earthworm castings, please do yourself a big favor and get some work some into your soil around your plants. You're going to see the difference. And then we have liquid fertilizers. Pardon me. Liquid fertilizers are going to be a really easy way for you to feed your plants throughout the growing season. I love liquid fertilizers. They're easy. They, give your plants a lot of bang for the buck, just so much good food for that soil biology, and for your plants. And what I do is I will, just according to the label's directions, mix it in a watering can, and I'll just water it around my food crops. So this could be our citrus trees, our fruit trees, our veggies, our berries, any fruiting vines and so forth. But the reason why I like to add the liquid fertilizer through the growing season is because it's just easy, fast way for the plants to get the food that they really require without me having to take a lot of time or effort to scratch that fertilizer into the top couple inches of the soil. I've already applied that fertilizer at time of planting, which is going to be enough for my annual food crops to get through their growing season. And something I just learned is if you're looking to add a little natural calcium to your food crops, because for instance, tomatoes really require a little bit of calcium to prevent that blossom end rot. This product right here actually is a really great way to get some holistic, good quality, well-balanced fertilizing food into the garden that includes calcium. So check that out. And then the second most important thing you can do to your garden. So first was adding compost to the soil, remember. The second is adding mulch. Mulch is going to be a protective layer that we put on top of the soil. Mulch can be compost, but what I'm referring to is going to be like bark chips or like shredded bark or wood chips that come from like an arborist when they're trimming trees and they're taking the branches through the chipper. So these are, bags of mulch that you buy at the local garden center. That's the bark chips. Now, if you live near a feed store, you can also get rice straw. Rice straw is high in silica, it doesn't break down as quickly. It's easy to use or to work with around vegetables. So that's what is pictured in the picture on the left. But really, it's anything that is going to provide a protective layer on top of the soil. And what we want to do is when we add mulch on top of the soil, ideally we want to make it a couple inches and understand that as the mulch breaks down, specifically the wood chips, it's going to add nutrients to the soil. It also is going to feed the soil microorganisms. It's going to prevent weed seeds from germinating. So we're going to see less weeds around the property. But the key here is that it reduces the water evaporation rate significantly, like really significantly. And something that I just heard from one of the nursery growers that I work with is he did a side-by-side test where he mulched his native plants on one side of the garden and the exact same plants on the other side, same sun and wind condition, he did not mulch. And the plants that were mulched performed 30% better. The reason why is because the plants were, that soil was able to hold on to the water in a very healthy way, healthy for the root system to be able to stay hydrated without being too wet. So that's something to really keep in mind. Mulch is really key. So adding compost to the soil to increase water holding capacity and having a nice layer of mulch on top is going to protect that soil. I can also share that it is going to reduce soil compaction and soil erosion. It's going to also keep the soil warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And something else is, especially in those areas where it gets baking hot, like Livermore, and we have clay conditions where we see that soil can very quickly turn into concrete, where we can't even get a pickaxe into it. When we have a layer of mulch on top, it protects that soil and prevents it from turning into concrete. And so when we get rain or when we happen to water that soil, the water is able to actually infiltrate. The one caveat is that we want to make sure that mulch is stays away from the crowns of the plants. That's where the top of the plant and the root system meet. And something else to keep in mind, if we buy mulch that is dyed, now those dyes are safe, they're vegetable based, but the mulches that are dyed black have a tendency to hold in heat through into the evening hours. So that could be too much heat in hot areas, but it might be a benefit in colder areas. So just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about the planning. So it's really important to be realistic with yourself and understand sun exposure. And we're only going to plant according to that sun exposure. So when we go to the garden center and we see these tags, let me see if I can. We see these tags right here. See these? They tell us a lot. One thing they tell us is, of course, the name of the plant, but they tell us how much sun exposure, how big it's going to get. And then if it's a food crop, it's going to tell us how many days to harvest. So, so full sun means 6 or more hours. Part sun, part shade means 3 to 6 hours of direct sun, but ideally the morning sun, because the morning sun is much cooler than the afternoon sun. So if we do have part sun in the afternoon from like that 1 to 4 o'clock, that's the hot part of the day, consult with the garden center associates just to confirm what plants would perform better in that type of hot sun. And then, of course, dappled sun is going to be filtered sunlight all day. And then shade, of course, is no direct sunlight. And that would be from like a house or a fence. Okay, not from, just house or fence. Okay, so here's the thing. When we plant and grow in raised beds, we're saving water. And the reason why is because we're able to localize the water to just a very unique space that is the raised bed. We're also able to concentrate our fertilizing into that space. But also if we have clay soil, now we get to, choose and control the type of soil we put into that raised bed. So we might put a really good quality raised bed mix. And then that is actually going to increase the drainage. So our plants are actually going to have healthier root systems. And then if we have gophers, we can now line the bottom of that with gopher wire or 1/2-inch hardware cloth. So it's going to protect our root systems. And then another thing to keep in mind is because it's a raised bed and we're walking around that raised bed, we're not compacting the soil. So it's not an issue. And then when we plant like leafy greens or any types of crops like chard, even onions, anything we might be harvesting regularly that might grow as a single plant that we would then harvest, we would want to plant a little bit closer together, because as those plants grow, they're actually creating shade and again, further reducing evaporation. And they are also creating a microclimate in between that is going to keep them cooler, the root systems cooler throughout the day. And so what we want to do is plant on a grid. Plant in clusters on a diamond grid or a hex pattern is really helpful, because then as we harvest, so these are all grown in and it looks pretty tight, pretty compact. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and harvest every other plant. And so then I've thinned it, you know, and now the other plants can continue to grow and fill in. And so it's a really great way to get the most bang for your buck and save a lot of water. And we're not going to have weeds and all of that good stuff. Now let's talk about which plants are best. So I'm so excited. Growing heirloom food crops, heirloom vegetables, heirloom fruit trees. My goodness, many of the heirloom varieties are from Mediterranean regions, which means they're ideal for our climate. They're ideal for summer dry California Mediterranean region. And so what happens is that when we plant heirloom crops, they're going to be more drought tolerant. They're going to be more able to handle drought stresses, and they're going to typically be water savers because they're really going to thrive on not watering as often once established. So just check this out. It's the cool thing about heirlooms is that they're very popular right now. So you can go and buy them just about anywhere. Go to your local garden center and check out all the varieties of cucumbers, tomatoes, basil, summer squash, the list goes on. And you can buy the seeds, you can buy the little starts, you know, but check it out. It's a lot of fun. And if you're not familiar with the National Heirloom Expo that happens typically every September in Santa Rosa at the fairgrounds, go online, check it out. Hopefully it'll happen this year, but I'm not sure. It didn't happen last year, but it will be coming back eventually. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. One of the best events I've ever been to. So another thing to keep in mind is when we're talking about saving water, a really good way to save water is to grow perennial vegetables and other perennial food crops. So that's going to be things like artichokes and asparagus and scarlet runner beans and rhubarb, sorrel, chives. You know, the list goes on. There are many more perennial veggies here. And the cool thing about the perennial vegetables is we're planting them once, and they can get integrated into our flower beds with other flowering perennials. And they take less resources once established. So once they're established, we are really not watering them that often. We're watering deeply, and we're not watering again until the top few inches is dry. We're fertilizing maybe, you know, once or twice a year, spring and fall, you know, with that dry fertilizer. We're adding mulch around, and we're just letting them do their thing. It's pretty cool. Scarlet runner beans are one of my most favorite perennials because it is a 3-season food crop. It is amazing. So we plant it and it starts to grows on a trellis or, you know, some type of staking system. And it's going to grow just like a string bean. And we're going to harvest them young, just like a string bean, and eat them just like a string bean. But then once we get a little bit further down into summer, they're going to get a little bit larger, a little tougher, and then we'll be harvesting them and chopping them up and putting them into stews or soups, more like I don't know. It just reminds me of like the beans that my grandma would put into soups and stews when I was a kid, you know, this Italian bean. And then if we leave it on the vine and we let it really dry on the vine, we can then harvest the seeds and store them as a dry bean. And that means we can now put them in soups and stews, or we can make like refried scarlet runner beans or put them into chilies or whatever. It's kind of cool. And it's really fun if you've got kids, because you can go, hey, go find some magic beans. They go over to the scarlet runner, you know, stalks. They pull out some beans, open it up, and there are these bright fuchsia and black beans. It's just amazing. It's a lot of fun. And then we've got annual food crops. Now, annual food crops can be water wise. We have a tendency to water a lot And I understand when the plants are little and we've just planted them, they sure need a lot of water because, well, they don't need a lot of water. They just need that root zone to get watered, right? So they have to be watered more frequently. But then as those roots grow, we can water less often. But we have a tendency to forget that, or maybe we don't understand that. We don't see what's going on. But as these plants become established, these plants really can thrive without much water at all. So we're looking at chard, kale, mustard greens, radishes, potatoes. This is fun. This is one of my favorites. I plant it every year. This is summer squash that is heirloom from Mexico. It does need some space. The tendrils they can go about 20 feet out, and they just produce a ton of food. So we're going to harvest them, these little green squashes, when they're young, just like we would any zucchini or summer squash. But then we can also leave them on the vine, and we can harvest them as a winter squash in the late summer. Kind of cool. But then in addition to that, arugula, I know someone said they're planting some arugula seeds, beets and carrots, cucumbers, onions, tomatoes, all of these plants, they're either going to grow in the soil, like the tubers, the onions, the potatoes, the carrots, the beets. These are all going to be growing in the soil. So they don't want to be soggy. The soil really wants to dry out around these food crops, or the root systems of these food crops grow so significantly that we do want to let the soil dry out slightly between watering. Garlic is another really cool one. This is extremely water wise. I know some of you said you planted some garlic. We typically plant garlic in October, November, and usually around that Halloween time, first week of November. And then it's in the ground all the way to harvest, which is typically around June or July. Now, that does seem like a big chunk of time to invest your precious garden space. However, it is so fun, and growing garlic, man, it is delicious and it's easy, and we can pretty much just ignore that section of the garden. It could be a single raised, it could be a single like half barrel or a smaller raised bed if you want. And it does not need to be on irrigation. If we haven't had any rains for about a week or two, then most likely you're just going to want to water that bed, but then that's it. Just kind of monitor. And I'll say that I haven't, you just don't have to water the garlic that much at all. They like to be dry. And then something that we forget about are garden herbs. Sorry, I think my puppies are barking in the background. Garden herbs, a lot of times we forget about how amazing and easy they are to grow. The basil, the borage, the cilantro, dill, lavender, oregano, parsley, rosemary, thyme, sage, tulsi, basil, and the list goes on. These are, again, we're looking at Mediterranean areas. They are, low water once established, and can really thrive in during some, times of drought. Fruiting vines and berries are also going to be really good choices because, again, they become established and their root systems can grow very deep, and they will need less water once established. And miniature fruit trees, if we've got small garden spaces, I just wanted to say this is a really great way to get fruit into the garden. These are true miniatures. These are not dwarfs. They are very small. They're going to max at about 4 to 6 feet, and a large container is perfect for them. And espalier fruit trees is also a great way to get fruit trees along the side of a house or a fence or a garage, where we can get fruit in small spaces. So now I'm going to talk about working with cover crops. Cover crops are really important for increasing the health of the garden and protecting the soil. And the reason, my favorite is fava beans. Fava beans, I typically will plant after my, in the fall, after my summer food crops are finishing up, and I let them grow through the cooler months of the year. I love fava beans because they're also giving me food. I will cut the top few inches of the fava beans, the new growth, as it starts to produce, and I'll chop it with some garlic and saute it in sesame oil, and it is delicious. And then if I am not using these as a cover crop, if I want to use them as a food crop, where I want to have those beans grow, I will have an area where the fava beans are growing as food, and then I can also grow them so I can capture and harvest beans so that I can have more plants or that I can eat. However, if I'm using them as a cover crop, I want to take advantage of their nitrogen fixed bacteria. These little nodes that you see, these little tiny white beads or pearls, or they might look a little bit like perlite. This is actually little nodes of nitrogen. So totally cool. And when we use these in the garden beds, we're actually growing free nitrogen for our plants. But the way we want to take advantage of this nitrogen is right when those flowers start to go into blossom is when we want to cut it at the base. We're going to cut that plant at the base. And the reason why is if we were to let that plant go all the way into bean, the reason why that plant is making those little nodes of nitrogen is because it needs that energy. It needs that nitrogen to produce and grow the beans that it grows. Those are pretty big beans. However, if I'm using it as a cover crop and I want to capture that nitrogen in the soil, right when those flower buds all start to pop open, not too far along, just really kind of at the beginning, I'm cutting it at the base, and then I'm going to plant my next crop, kind of alternating it in all the void spots. So I'm going to be planting on that grid again, but I'm just shifting that grid over a couple inches so that when my tomatoes or when my cucumbers, those root systems start to grow, they're going to weave in with the fava bean roots and capture all of that nitrogen. So it's just another way to get more energy into our soils, especially when we've got clay soil. And then we don't want to forget about planting flowers. We want to attract beneficial insects. And because so many of the beneficial insects and pollinators are tiny, we're going to choose plants that actually are clusters of tiny flowers. So plants that are considered insectary plants will offer nectar and pollen for our beneficial insects and pollinators. And these are going to be flowers that look like a daisy or a sunflower, because the petals are raised, and that button in the middle is actually hundreds of little small flowers. Or we're going to plant and grow flowers that are growing clusters like yarrow or alyssum, ceanothus, things like that. Because again, those are clusters of little flowers in the middle of those petals. So how many of you have had this experience? Let's say May, June, I start to get a lot of questions coming my way that say, I think I've got a virus in my soil. My soil's contaminated. I got a really bad plant at the nursery. My zucchinis are rotting. I don't know what to do. Is there anything I could do to fix it? Do I need to remove that plant? And I just let everyone know, it's okay. Your plant is fine, your soil is fine, but what you don't have are pollinators. These, specifically the bee that pollinates these squashes. So what's so nice is that you want to invite some flowers and plant them around the perimeter of your food crops. It doesn't have to be a lot, but a nice diversity. Remember, flowers are just as important as food. And if that's not the case, then what you want to do is go on to YouTube and watch a couple videos on how to hand pollinate the male flowers to female flowers, because what this is lack of pollination. All right, now this is when things start to get really good. We're going to talk about how to plant and how to water. So when we buy plants at the store, or if we're growing things from seed and they've been in the pot, these little cell packs for a while, the root systems are going to grow the same shape as the container. So what we want to do is we want to encourage those root systems to grow out. So when we, hopefully everyone has a collection of these things, these tags when we buy plants, and these are really great tools. I'll tell you, not only do they tell me a lot of great information, but then I use this to tease those root systems. What we want to do is encourage the roots to grow out. We don't want to plant plants when the root systems are like this, or they're just going to girdle each other. We want to encourage them to start to go out. Don't worry, you can kind of open up those little root hairs. If you break a few, that's okay. The plant is going to thrive. Because what we want to do is we want to start to encourage the root systems to grow out and down. And we can only do that with water, because water dictates how the roots grow, because roots are only going to go where the water goes. If we are watering shallowly, and those root systems are going to stay shallow. So we want to encourage deep root systems. So it's going to be a little challenging if we've got, sandy soil versus clay soil, because sandy soil, the water just kind of rushes right through. Clay soil is very slow to absorb. So it might pool on top, which means we will have to stop the irrigation or stop watering and let that water penetrate. And then we're going to turn it on again, wait till it pools, and then we're going to do stop and let it infiltrate. So this is called pulsing the water out. So we want to get the volume of water out, but we might have to do it a little bit more slowly. So the picture on the left here is a pop-up sprinkler. It's going to be watering very shallowly. And what happens is, as I mentioned, we have a shallow root system. And then what happens again is then we're going to, if we have like a hot day, if it goes from 70 degrees every day, all of a sudden to like 80, which is not unusual, that water is going to evaporate out really quick. If we're not paying attention and we haven't adjusted the irrigation system to accommodate that, that water evaporation, and then that plant is dry and is stressed, over time, that stressed plant is going to start to show signs of decline. It might get some pest problems. It might get some diseases. So just keep that in mind. Now, the picture in the middle, that little black like tubing on top is supposed to be irrigation tubing. And then there's a little emitter that's supposed to show that there's water is coming out and they're watering deeply. But what happens is they forgot that the plant grows. So as your plants grow, especially our larger vegetables like tomatoes and summer squash, the zucchinis, we want to make sure we're bringing the emitters out. And we might need to add a couple more emitters, because we really want to be watering around the plant out here a little bit more, not at that trunk. So the picture on the right shows that we're watering deeply, and we're not watering again until the top few inches is dry. And this is to help as the plants become established, we can water less often. So come August, we should be watering our tomatoes not every day. We really want to let the top couple inches of the soil dry out. So irrigation systems are going to be really helpful. We are going to be able to localize the water so that it's only watering the plants. That water is making direct contact with the soil, so we've got less water evaporation rate. We're not watering other areas of the garden that there are no plants, so that means we see less weeds. We can set the timer early in the morning, so we can water when the air is cool and the soil temperatures are cool. Ideally, the best time to water is really anywhere between, like, let's say 4 and 6 or 4 and 7 a.m. We want to water early in the morning, just before sunrise to sunrise. And that gives the whole day for that plant to absorb the water and to dry, so it's not really wet as we go into that evening. And then we can set the clock for multiple start times so that we can pulse that water out. So if we do have that clay soil or super sandy soil, we can add water at small amounts at a time. There's also really cool alternatives, which are battery and solar operated remote controllers that we can just plug into hose bibs. So if we've got a section of the garden that we just added, or if we're going on vacation or something and we just need to get some water out to plants that we normally hand water, this is an opportunity to set that up with ease. And what I just wanted to share, because teaching people how to water is one of the hardest things. Understanding watering our plants is really challenging because we don't see what's going on underneath the soil. So I'd like to invite all of you to get in the habit of feeling the soil. So we have these different types of ways water comes out. We've got the PE tubing. Sometimes it has emitters in line where water can weep out of those little areas, or we'll be plugging in spaghetti tubing to that PE tubing, where now we've got this little emitter as pictured on the left, where water is going to be coming out. We want to understand, what is the flow rate of that water? Is it half a gallon per hour? Is it 1 gallon per hour? Is it 2 gallons per hour? Because that's going to make a big difference. If we've got our irrigation clock set for 30 minutes, are we giving each area where that water is coming out a quart of water, or are we giving it a gallon of water? See how it can get a little complicated? I don't mean to overwhelm you with math, but it's really good for you to have an understanding of how much volume are we actually watering our plants, because a quart of water is not going to do anything for plants that are, have been planted in the ground for a couple of weeks. Those root systems are really starting to grow and they want more water. So what we want to do is we want to have our irrigation systems turn on as they are. Let's say we have them set for Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They're set for 30 minutes. It goes off at 6 in the morning. Great. So 6:30, it's off. I would walk around the garden around 7:30, maybe even 8. Feel the soil. Has the water gotten down deep enough? We want to really try to get that water down about 5 inches. It'll continue to move down, but we want to kind of get it down in this zone. Did the water infiltrate deep enough? Okay, great. Looks like everything got watered even. We don't have any, everything is nicely, evenly moist. Now, that was Monday. Wednesday, it's supposed to go off at 6 o'clock. Tuesday afternoon, late in the day, let's say at 7 o'clock before sundown, I'm going to go and feel that soil. Is the soil dry? Has it dried out? It's not dry yet. Bam, I don't need to turn that irrigation on again. So I'm going to turn the irrigation off. I'm going to check again the next day. Oh, turns out we only need to have it on twice a week. So here it is. It takes a little bit of time to become familiar with how water is, how we're watering our gardens. Once we kind of figure it out, then it's very intuitive. Trust me. Something else I want to share with you is Greywater. Laundry landscape Greywater is very popular. It's gaining in popularity. You're going to start to hear more about it. Very easy to install. It is California acceptable. It's just all we're doing is installing a 3-way valve, and then we have an option of having that water from the washing machine go out to the garden to water fruit trees, established trees and shrubs and perennials, or we can have it go to the sewer system. So very easy. Just a couple of things. The washer machine needs to be above the grade of the garden. If your garden is above the grade, then it won't work because it'll be too much stress on the washer machine itself. And we just want to make sure that washer machine has a shared wall with the outside, because we need to drill a hole through that wall. And then we want to make sure any of the laundry detergents we use are going to be Greywater compatible and not be high in salts or anything that would be toxic or detrimental to our soils and the plant health. Some really cool resources that you can check out. Greywater Action is going to be the #1. So look into that. And then, of course, in the fall, before our next rainy season, please, please, please take advantage of any type of rainwater harvesting rebates or any type of rainwater harvesting tools that you can, because with 1 inch of rain over 1,000 square foot surface, we can capture 625 gallons of water. It's amazing. So this is free water that we can keep on site. I just had to share that with you. But because we live in an area that definitely can get over 100 degrees for multiple days, even over 90 degrees, we want to protect our plants from the sun. And a couple of things to keep in mind is that we're going to paint the trees, any trees like new fruit trees, if we've got larger shrubs, anything like that, we want to paint them and protect the bark. And what we're going to do is either buy a product like this IV Organics whitewash, which you can get. It's a really great product. Or you can paint with 50-50 latex paint to water. And when we work with latex paint, it wants to be a light color, like white or tan or cream, something like that. And we're going to paint it all the way up to where the plant starts to branch out, that crotch of that plant. Because ideally, the canopy of the plant is shading the upper part of the plant, and we just need to paint the bottom part. And we're going to take advantage of shade cloth. Shade cloth is very important. It's going to help protect our plants because guess what? Come July and August, when we really start to get those hot days, we know we're hydrating our plants. We know we're watering deeply. I'm not watering as often because Suzanne told me not to, but it's still, I'm a little anxious. I feel like I still need to water. I don't trust that the root systems of those plants are getting enough water. I come home from a hot day, my plants are wilted. Oh my gosh, I need to water again. Feel the soil first, because plants, when plants are stressed from excessive heat or from dehydration or even sometimes from excessive cold, the way they show stress is by wilting. So sometimes the plants are not dehydrated, they're just too hot. So I just like to share that because it's a common mistake that's made. So when we can use shade cloth, it's going to help protect our plants. Now, for a year-round situation, if we've got plants that are sun lovers and we just need to employ a little shade because we want to prevent them from getting burned, like sun scald, then we can use a 10% shade cloth, which is perfect for like kind of a year-round or through the long daylight hours. 30% shade cloth is going to be perfect for more sun-sensitive plants. These would be established trees and shrubs, perennials, things like that. But during the heat of the summer, to protect our food crops, it's nice to, what we'd want to go for is a 30 to 50% shade cloth. Maximum is going to be a 40 to 60. When we get anything really above 40, it's really casting a lot of shade on our plants. We kind of want to be careful. Our plants still do want sunshine. Shade loving plants are going to prefer that 75% or higher. And then just to put it in perspective, what we like is 80 to 90%. So hopefully that's helpful. So tips for a water-wise garden is we're going to add organic matter, that is compost, to the soil so we can increase the water holding capacity. We are going to take advantage of all the benefits mulch has, but specifically because it's going to reduce water evaporation. We are going to water deeply to encourage deep root systems, even on our annual vegetable crops. And then as those plants become established, we are going to reduce the frequency. We're not going to be watering every single day. We are going to focus the water around the drip lines of the plant. So remember, as those plants grow, we're going to bring the emitters, or we're going to focus the water out a little bit around that drip line, the outer edge of that plant. And there's a lot of information we gave you on the resource page, and I think that our hosts are going to discuss some rebates, but just know that many cities and counties offer rebates to install high efficiency irrigation systems, and in some cases, laundry to landscape greywater systems. And then more tips for our water-wise garden is we're going to feed our food crops with organic fertilizers. We're going to water the roots deeply. We're going to grow biodiversity to invite the pollinators and the beneficial insects. We're going to monitor for pest problems. We're going to harvest our food, and we're going to enjoy the bounty. So a couple of resources I like to share because pest problems do come up is the Our Water, Our World website has a really great catalog of fact sheets that address certain pest problems like aphids or ants, yellow jackets, mosquitoes. They're typically just one page, front and back, very easy, and they break down the pest problem solving with the integrated pest management approach. And then of course our UC IPM website, which is just a wonderful library of information for us when we do have pest problems and we're not exactly sure what it is. I will, let's say I've got a plum tree and I've got a pest problem, something doesn't look right, I don't really know what it is. I will type plum in, in the search bar, and then all the problems that plum tree gets are going to come up, and through a process of elimination, I can identify what is going on. So really helpful. Check it out. Some other resources for growing food are going to be these awesome books, the Sunset Western Garden book, the edibles, Growing Edibles, Golden Gate Gardener, and then Growing More Food, the John Jarvin's book. So with that, you just learned a lot, didn't you? Thank you for joining us. You could check all of us out at all of these social media sites. So check it out. It's a lot of fun. And we're going to take your questions now. And I'm going to let everyone talk about the rebates that they offer.
Thanks, Suzanne. We're so appreciative. You did get quite a few questions in. Did you want me to read them to you, or are you seeing them on your screen? And I also want to be cognizant of everyone's time because it's just after 5:05, so it's in exactly an hour.
Yeah.
What do you say?
So for those of you that have to leave, remember, this is being recorded. We're going to send you that information where you can find the recording later. But for those of you that have questions and would like to stay to hear the answers, please do. Typically, Susan, what we'll do is you might notice that a lot of the questions, there might be some themes in some of the questions. So you can kind of group those questions together, or
Okay.
and then we can go through questions for about 20 minutes.
Okay. That's great. Looks like a lot of folks are staying on, but let's start with Martha's question. Do you need to pick one or the other type of fertilizer, or is it okay to use more than one? For example, fish emulsion, liquid, and organic dry fertilizer?
Yes, thank you for asking that. I apologize if it wasn't clear. I will always use the dry fertilizer at time of planting, and for my perennial food crops, or my perennial flowers, my fruiting vines and trees, I will feed with dry fertilizer once to twice a year. And then through the growing season, which is typically, now through September, October, for our summer vegetable crops, I will water in addition. I've used the dry fertilizer, but now I'm feeding with liquid fertilizer just to give it a little bit more oomph. Now, citrus is different. Citrus are heavy feeders because they're evergreen. You're going to be wanting to fertilize with that dry fertilizer about every other month, and alternating with a liquid fertilizer.
Great, thank you. Okay, my chili peppers get brown spots on the side of the fruit. Is that lack of pollinators or something else? They seem to start at the hottest part of the summer.
Interesting. So I'm not exactly sure. You can always email me the pictures of what you're talking about, but what I know is that even though the peppers really like the heat, they don't always like the sun. So a trick I've learned is that I will plant my tomatoes in a line, and then I plant my peppers and basil on the other side, so that they either get morning sun or they'll get a portion of the filtered sun all day, because they like the heat, but they don't necessarily want direct sun all day. They can have a tendency to be a little bit sensitive to that hot afternoon sun.
So this is a matter of really getting to know your plants, right? Yeah. Right plant, also, right place.
Yeah, and be mindful if you're over watering, like if you're watering with the hose, you could actually be, that could also be it. And maybe you are already, but for everyone out there, get in the habit of always watering the soil and not the plant parts, especially during the hot part of the summer.
Perfect, good tip. And touch the soil, right? You said that a lot. Yeah. Should we change our watering during or before heat waves? Should we change our watering during or before heat waves?
Well, if we have employed this really good, healthy practice of watering deeply, I'm going to share that your plants can get through heat wave no problem. We might need to just give a little extra water, like one day. But again, we want to feel that soil. We want to make sure that soil is dried out. We have that nice layer of mulch on top protecting it. And then we're going to use shade cloths to help protect our plants. Okay. We're going to just play it by ear, but I do not touch my irrigation controller, when we have a heat wave, I might go around and hand water a little bit extra, especially containers, because they have a tendency to dry out faster. But the soil in the ground typically still stays hydrated.
Okay. Well, you've got mulch on there too. You talked
Yeah.
about that. Awesome. And then speaking of mulch, Cindy's curious about straw for mulch. Is there a problem with straw blowing around the yard?
Oh, great question. No, I use rice straw around my veggie crops. It mats into place really well. It does not blow.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never had that problem.
Okay, good, thanks.
Mhm.
And then I've had a couple people ask, actually, they're wondering if there's a way to get a copy of your slides, and I wasn't sure about that, of course.
Yeah, no, the recording will be available, but
Okay.
I don't give out my slide deck, but the
Gotcha.
copy will be, yeah, the recording will be
Okay.
available.
No problem. I kind of
Yeah.
thought that might be the case. So now I'm back. Now I'm into the chat. There were a few questions in there. Sorry.
Oh no, this is great.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, I've skipped up to the things that everyone is planting, which is wonderful. So
I
let's
know.
see. Okay, boy, people are planning so many things,
I
and
know. Isn't
then
it fun? I hope
yes, it's so.
everyone.
I was gonna chime in on that. I've got blueberries and all sorts of things around my place. Okay, so Kay Stein was asking, or is asking. I have buckets of mulch that has gotten wet in rainy season and has some mold/fungus on it from sitting in buckets. Can this be mixed into soil?
Absolutely. That fungus is actually good. That's the
Okay.
mycelium. We want to, that's helping you out. That's just that's part of the composition. That fungus is helping to decompose those leaves. But yeah, let's get it out there, spread it out, rake it out, and get some, either work it in the soil or put it underneath with a layer of mulch on top.
Fantastic. Oh, that's good. I bet that person's happy.
Yeah.
How do you feel about adding peat moss? I'm in open space, sun all day, very windy, 40-degree temperature swings.
Oh yeah. Well, peat moss is one, it's not renewable. It can be expensive. If you're looking for an alternative to that, you can get these bricks of coconut coir that you can get at garden supply places. Some of the local garden centers have them, and then you soak them in water, they expand. I use that medium for my worm bin. But to be honest, you also want to add compost. We really want to get that organic matter into the soil because it is it's a complete network that is going to function to do all the parts I spoke to earlier. It's going to open up the soil. It's going to aerate the soil. It's going to increase the water holding capacity. It's also going to increase the microbiology, that life, the living part of the soil, which is what we want to get to. Because when we have live, healthy soil, we're the soil is only going to improve, which means we're only going to be able to capture more nutrients, more water, and then there'll be airflow.
Okay. Okay, great. We've got a couple more questions. Then I do want to still give Allison, Alex, and Natalie a quick moment to speak. We have one new message and it's 5:13. So I'm just keeping my facilitator hat on. So are pine needles okay to use as a mulch with veggies, Suzanne?
Yeah, pine needles, I would say, are fine. Use in moderation. But what I have learned is that it's better to work with products like little wood chips or that rice straw. What
Okay.
we've found, especially because of fire awareness, is that we want to avoid using or having excessive areas of like leaves, pine needles, because they can be get really dry and be flammable.
Okay.
So and not to say I don't know where you live. You might not be in a fire prone area, but I feel like all of California is fire prone. So
We got to be
just keep
careful.
that in mind. Now you can put mulch on top of those leaves, or you can work those, needles into a compost. They'll break down a little slower, but and in moderation. We're not going to do a huge heap and make that the main component. We're going to use it in moderation. But yes,
Okay.
all these things are nature's mulch, so
Okay.
you can keep them on site.
That's great. Moderation, that's the key to everything, isn't it? Okay, so would you recommend a weed liner at the bottom of the raised bed? And also, what is an ideal height for raised beds for tomatoes, peppers, and okra?
I love it.
So 2 questions.
I do not recommend a weed fabric. However, because you can get filter fabric. Filter fabric is probably what I would work with, because it's going to allow the water to drain through. Not to say that it won't drain through the weed cloth, but weed cloths have a tendency to break down over time, and then you're left with this mess of a lot of like little plastic particles, which is no bueno. So what I would recommend is, if you have to line your beds with filter fabric or something similar to that. And then the height, I would as tall as possible. So my question, I guess, is why do you feel like you need to line the bed with some type of a weed barrier? You have, because typically we're putting so much soil on top that we shouldn't have weeds. Although I know sometimes Bermuda grass will come up from the bottom. In that case, I might recommend, what I've done before is lay down cardboard, and then I put my raised bed on top of that. I've also lined my raised bed with gopher wire, and then I put the soil on top. But then, to your point of how tall it should be, well, it's to your liking. I've got raised beds that are only about 6 inches tall, but I've got other ones that are probably 18 inches tall. It really depends on if you're on top of clay, you probably want to go a little higher. If you've got sore knees or a bad back, you might want to go higher. If you are maybe in a wheelchair or some type of compromised physical disability, then maybe higher. Like, keep all these things in mind, but really it's whatever you want to design. You get to choose, which is the fun part. But one thing I will keep in mind or share with you is, just from my own experience of making these mistakes, is don't go too wide. So I think like 2.5, 3 feet maybe is the widest, because you have to be able to harvest stuff in the middle. And I've sadly made a bed that was 4 feet wide, and I couldn't reach. So that was my mistake. Or especially if you're going on the back, if you're planting and the trellis is on the back and it's really wide, you can't reach. So just those things.
Okay. And then we do have a couple more. They keep coming.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of thank yous going through here as well. Suzanne, do you use inoculants with your favas?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I just put them right in. They are really, they're hardy. Yeah. I have not ever had to have that experience, but if you, no, I don't.
Okay. No. Have mint growing in our planters. It's prolific. Is it okay to still plant in and throughout the mint?
I would try to rip out the mint as much as possible, because mint will take over and choke out those other plants. Okay. So just try to remove those sections of mint. And then if you have to, put in some like root barrier, try to contain the mint, or remove the mint completely, plant it in its own container. It's going to still thrive. You can, mint is very tolerant.
I have some mint too. I love that. And then I think finally we've got, what is the best to put around raised beds, bark or gravel or something else? I
prefer bark, but you can certainly use gravel. But maybe instead of gravel, maybe consider decomposed granite. I'm a huge fan of permeable surfaces whenever and wherever possible. But bark seems to be really easy. I sheet mulch around my raised beds, so then I don't see weeds for a good 18 months.
Good. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Let's see, Natalie, did you want to say anything, or Alex or Allison, Zone 7? Do you guys, there we go, Natalie. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that after this presentation, Suzanne is going to email out some resources to you guys. So in those resources are going to be some recommended books. All of the books on that list are available at the Livermore Library if you want to pick them up for free. And also on that sheet is going to be some rebate information for you guys. There'll be 2 links depending on if you are a Cal Water or a Livermore Municipal Water customer. And if you happen to be in Livermore Municipal Water Service area, we have a few rebates that can help you off with WaterWise gardening. We have a rebate towards a smart irrigation controller, and we also have a rebate available for people who are interested in converting their lawns into drought-tolerant landscaping. And then I don't know if you want to get into the rebates that are available for Cal Water customers too.
Well, I'll just say real quick, we also have weather-based irrigation controllers on rebate and some irrigation devices. So nozzles and, well, of course, then we have toilets and washing machines, but we're not here to talk about that. So just follow that link. And of course, both Natalie, Alex, Allison, and I are always available. Alex, what did you have?
So everyone covered the rebates, so I'll just give a quick plug to our Facebook page. We have a new campaign. We're all thinking about the drought conditions and not getting a lot of rainfall this year. So we just launched WaterWise Wendy, who is providing a lot of WaterWise tips around the home. We're focusing on outdoor water use this summer coming up. So we have videos on water saving tips. They're nice, short, quick, so you can get some tips around the yard on how to save water, and those will be launching in May for Water Awareness Month. So follow our Facebook page and you'll be kept updated on those.
So great. I love WaterWise Wendy. I got a chance to see her. So fantastic. Well, Suzanne, if you want to, I think we are good to go.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us. It's been fantastic. And yeah, happy